Oh, I may need to mute something, right?
My guess
Okay.
is probably not. Just because
Sounds good.
use the-
Yeah, I'll talk to it. That's good, yeah. That's what happened.
Coordinate everybody to do it together, so it's kind of like I'm gonna have to go down. Right. I'm gonna make those appointments in October then. Okay. Fair enough. Give you some.
Go to the screen just to make sure that's. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I have to want to, but,
Roll.
Yes, it's safe. Mr. Chair. At your,
Let's go finance committee meeting to order. All members are present. Before we adopt the agenda, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to move items 9 and 10 up under public comment. That's right, then I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as.
I'll move with the adjustment.
For Jeff, second by Virginia to adopt the agenda as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approved, opposed, hearing none. I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from September 13th as published. For John, second by Virginia, all in favor? Aye, opposed, hearing none. Motion carried. Public comment. Anyone here for public comment? Ben, you wanna-
Yeah. So you recall, I was at the September 9th meeting and asked about business on our plate, so just, these are copies of letters of support in support of the county continuing its funding support for economic development. So I know it's budget time of year, and I know historically the funding for the EDC has been a topic of conversation in the past, so just wanted to stay in front of everybody on that. If anybody had any questions or things like that, I wanted to be here to address those. So these are just a sampling of different business types that we have assisted over the course of the last year. You'll see the various sectors, various sizes and things like that, just to gauge how we're engaging with those different businesses, both public and private. So with that.
There was a letter from the city of Kewaunee, wasn't there? You never got that? I signed it
I didn't check my email this morning, so.
a week ago. I signed it. So, girls might not have got it.
So the, I guess, thank you for that, yeah.
Anyone else for public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 9, health insurance plan.
I have to my right, your left, Dan Mongovan from Horton. Horton's been with us for, I don't know, a couple decades now. Basically. So, not you?
I was a baby. I was a baby.
So, and just so you're aware, we asked Horton to kind of, what's the right word, put us out there to the market to see what options were available. In that same respect, starting in February of this year, we had put together an employee group to also kind of look at these options and try to provide some recommendations to the finance committee, since a lot of these health plans have a direct impact upon them as employees. And so before going to what that group had kind of agreed as recommendations, I guess I just like to introduce Dan and have him kind of go over the process, the different options that we have. And I want to let the committee know that a decision does not need to be made today. In fact, I was assuming with the amount of information that a decision wouldn't be made today. but I would still like one to have be completed or decided upon still in the month of October. But again, there's a lot of information, and I'm going to guess there'll be some questions. So with that, I will let Dan take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Feld. Good morning, everybody. So, yes, Dan Von Golden with the Horton Group, here to talk to you about insurance, right? A necessary evil these days. It has been a while, I would say, since the county has been marketed out to the competitive marketplace from a health insurance perspective. You are self-funded and have been for a very long time, meaning you effectively are the insurance company for your population up to certain thresholds. And it's been what it's been. And it was time, I think, for various reasons to approach the competitive landscape and find out, are we doing this thing the best way we can do this thing? You spend $3 million on health insurance. It is a large line item for the county and really for any employer. And it was time to go out and conduct some diligence for various reasons, just to sort of figure out, again, are we doing the right thing? Should we be with the state plan? Should we be fully insured? Should we be doing what other counties are doing and other counties are doing? Various different things. So, as Mr. Felt referenced, this process started with sort of an employee committee and sort of an educational, almost insurance 101 type process back in February. And we hypothesized and theorized what things could look like and what things could be like. But ultimately, none of that matters until we go out to bid and get, and sort of where the rubber meets the road, until WCA and until Prevea and until United Healthcare come back to us and say, here's what we would charge the county to insure them. And so that's effectively what's sort of in front of you here today. Just a couple of pages of kind of what those results looked like. And so mine happens to be in color. I'll start on this this page here, just sort of referencing this top half. So we go out to the fully insured marketplace, a spot where you can sort of offload your risk and no longer be self-funded and put the burden of paying claims on an insurance company. And so we've done that. And options 1 through 9 are sort of a smattering of what those results have come back to us at. And I'll just, before I even dive into it, I'll say I'm not surprised at how things came back. They came back generally how I expected. To save money, it will require doing something different and disruptive. Otherwise, the status quo remains just that, the status quo at a modest, we could keep doing what we're doing today at a 3.5% increase with Humana and go on with our lives, or there's opportunities to certainly save some money. But in my world and in the insurance world, that does generally come with some change and some disruption, provider disruption, and which therefore might mean employee disruption and how and where they access care. We'll talk about that a little bit. So I suppose in sort of descending order from option 1 on down the line, we have an option with Prevea 360, which is a sort of a local HMO. You're familiar with them, with the clinic in town here and the clinic in Algoma and et cetera, Luxembourg. There's a chance to save some money by moving to a fully insured platform with Prevea 360. They're very interested in your business, and the price point certainly is compelling. But when you move to a provider system like that, like a Prevea 360, it comes, like I discussed, with some angst. So folks that currently doctor at Bellin would be out of luck. It would be not only out of network, but not even covered from an insurance perspective. Folks that doctor at Aurora would have to access Aurora on an out of network basis, which means those folks, the employees and their family members, would have added financial burden from a deductible and out of pocket and co-insurance perspective if they were a family that doctored at Aurora. If you go to St. Vincent's and if you go to Prevea or if you go to a Holy Family, you'd be okay. But our analysis would suggest that roughly 50% of the utilization of Kewaunee County employees and members would fall within the Prevea network, and 50% would fall outside of the Prevea network. And that's a opinion, that's a measurable amount of disruption. Okay, so that's Prevea 360. WCA Group Health Trust, Wisconsin Counties Association, right? Really familiar, really solid insurance player on the fully insured platform, was coming in right around a 1.2% increase to sort of what we're spending today. And that would be on a broad network basis. So I don't need to have the discussion I just did about people not being able to go to Aurora or not being able to go to Bellin. That's a broad network, really expansive, and people would have no problem accessing care. If we were to look at option 4, Humana, we're with Humana today on a self-funded basis. If we wanted to move to Humana on a fully insured basis, we could do that and pay about 5.8% more in premium to make that transition. Options 5, 6, and 7, the county some time ago, I don't know, probably in summertime, probably submitted a bid to the state ETF, which is the state plan that you hear about, the employee trust fund, which some employers are a part of. If I speak out of turn here, just stop me. But in general, those quotes came back, and the result of that was the ETF has the ability to underwrite all new groups and new public sector employers that want to be a part of that program. And in underwriting the county, after looking at the county's experience and claims over the last, call it 24 months, the ETF reserves the right to place sort of an added premium on top of certain groups that might have higher risk profiles than they'd prefer to bring into their pool. And the county would be dinged with that sort of added premium for the first 2 years. And with that added premium or sort of risk charge, it effectively made the state plan less competitive. I would say uncompetitive, at least in the near term. And so that's what some of those pricings support. And then options 8 and 9, I'll spare you the discussion there. So that's sort of the fully insured marketplace. On the self-funded side of things, like I said, we could remain self-funded with Humana. We could keep doing what we're doing for a roughly 3.5% increase and move on with our lives. The only other really self-funded option that's going to make some sense is option 3 through a program or a product called Centivo. And Centivo is not the insurance company, but the county would remain the insurance company in effect up to $55,000 per belly button. But there's a model out there newer to Wisconsin and starting to get some traction that would change things up a little bit for the county. So I think to maybe bring this to life, would you all please flip to the third page? Let's look at that third page. So on the perfect. This is good. So the employee committee effectively sort of narrowed down our options. I just threw a smorgasbord at you. The way we felt like paths forward for the county would make sense is sort of 3 options. Number 1, and these are not in ranking order. Number 1, keep doing what we're doing. Stick with Humana, take the modest 3.5% increase, and no disruption, very familiar. Option 1. Option 2, move towards this narrow network Prevea 360 fully insured platform. Quite a bit of savings, but quite a bit of disruption. We certainly had some discussions around, is it worth it? Is it good? Is it right? What type of fallout might exist from the employee population? When you move to these narrow network sort of HMO platforms, what about emergency care? What about tertiary care if somebody really needed, was in sort of a tough medical situation and Prevea couldn't handle it or didn't have the capabilities to handle it? Where where could they go and what type of financial impact might that have on the employee. But nonetheless, Prevaya's, on our list of 3. And then this Centivo concept, stay self-funded, continue to have sort of the autonomy that the county's been accustomed to in that self-funded environment, and provide some choice for our employees, whether or not they would be comfortable with that lower cost narrow network option, or if they wanted to sort of buy up to the more broad network traditional platform. So any questions this moment?
What's the difference between, I'm going back to the first page, options 1 and 2, Purveyor 360.
Yeah.
Purveyor 360, obviously very different percentages from the current. I'm assuming that's because of differences in deductibles and things.
So you're asking the difference between option 1 and 2.
Correct.
Very good. So let's cover that. So I'm going to go back to page 3 here. On the far right-hand column of page 3, it says Purveyor 360 assumes a 50-50 enrollment split. So in these HMO models, these provider-owned insurance companies like a Purveyor 360, there are sort of 2 price points to access their network and their health insurance product. The HMO network, which is the cheaper or lower cost option, would be for people, we would give people a choice. You could either take the HMO option or you could take the POS option. The HMO option would work well for people that are already in the Purveyor system. And that's, again, Purveyor, Holy Family, St. Vincent's. So that's about it. If you were already doctoring in those places and had no reason to access Aurora or to go outside of the Purveyor network, then you would be a good candidate to enroll in the HMO product. If that didn't fit well for your family and you were willing to sort of buy up or pay a little bit more in premium to get access to out-of-network providers, then the POS or the point of service product could and would be right for you. And so Purveyor recognizes that if they want to write business in this area or up and down, so, I don't know, from Oostburg to Green Bay is kind of their, and then they've got some access points way out west. They know that Purveyor is not right for everybody. There just are some families or people that doctor outside of Purveyor, Ascension, Aurora, I'd say Bellin, but quite frankly, Purveyor does not have a contract with Bellin, and Bellin does not recognize people with Purveyor insurance. With a little bit of a sticky wicket, right? And they've been crystal clear about that. Like if people have Purveyor insurance and they go to Bellin, it's as if they don't have insurance. And that's what Purveyor says. So that's why, sir, there are sort of, that's the discrepancy between the HMO and the POS. The cheaper price point, if you're good with Purveyor and all your care is in Purveyor, if you're somebody that doctors outside of the Purveyor system, then you want that point of service product that you will pay up for.
And you're going to show us as we go the difference between each of these, how it would impact the employees as far as deductibles and copays.
Yes, so the intent on the deductibles and copays was to match what we have today. And so by and large, what I'm showing you matches what we have today. For example, the Purveyor HMO product is basically a mirror image of the benefits, the deductibles, copays, co-insurances of what you have with Aurora today. On the Purveyor POS product, the point of service product, the one where if people needed to get to Aurora, they would use that product. Here's the other rub there. The in-network benefits of the Purveyor POS product, $1,000 deductible, $2,000 for a family, out-of-pocket maximums closely mirroring what you have today. That's all good. But if people want to get to Aurora on the point of service product, they will access Aurora on an out-of-network basis and through those out-of-network benefits, which are double the in-network benefits, right? So another sort of financial burden and or disincentive for folks that maybe doctor at Aurora aren't willing to change that doctoring relationship, would be willing to pay more premium for this point of service product, but would have, for all intents and purposes, worse benefits than they have today. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. So that was, kind of Purveyor in a nutshell. It's got, a little bit of hair on it, but certainly from a price perspective is noteworthy and why it's being discussed today. The Centivo side of things, will be another little bit of a convoluted discussion, but Centivo is, like I mentioned, new to the marketplace. They're kind of definitely making some waves in their
New to the Wisconsin market.
new to the Wisconsin marketplace. Yeah, been in business five years. Right now, they're writing Northwestern Mutual and Baird and some large employers in sort of southeast Wisconsin. And their model and their mechanism is to sort of disrupt traditional healthcare. So Centivo's, what their intention is to get people to the best providers and to guide people through primary care physicians. It's kind of back to the old days when you used to have to go to your primary care doctor and sort of that gatekeeper model, and the primary care doctor would refer you into the system. Centivo is sort of a blend of what that's all about. And because Centivo and their intent is to get a bit more engaged in how members access healthcare, they believe that there's savings in that. And it's probably hard to argue. So with the Centivo platform, we would stay self-funded. Okay, so I as your consultant, think that there is certainly some value in that. Staying self-funded, having the autonomy to sort of pay for Kewaunee County's claims, not necessarily be pooled with everybody else and have to sort of either be a subsidizer or subsidizee. It's very sort of cut and dry. And the Centivo platform comes somewhat similar to Prevea with two choices for the employee population. Choice one is sort of the right-hand column of this Centivo illustration, which says the HPS network and has a single rate of $9.69 and a family rate of $25.63. So that HPS network and that sort of column of benefits is identical to what we have with Humana today, and that's the intent. The benefits match what we've got with Humana today. The network, the HPS network, would be very, very similar to what we have today with Humana, meaning people could go to Aurora, people could go to Prevea, people could go to St. Vincent's, people could go to Theta, people could go to Door County Memorial, Bellin as well, okay? So sort of a broad network option for employees that didn't want to have any disruption in what they're accustomed to, quite frankly, what doctors they're seeing and how they access those doctors and what benefits they have today. And that would cost employees a little bit more. For those employees that wanted to pay less out of their paycheck and were okay with what I'm about to describe to you, they would choose this high performance plan Wisconsin 2 network. And I appreciate it. I'm talking a lot and there's a lot going on here. You're accustomed to just sort of one plan, one network, take it or leave it. Well, we're adding some choice into the mix here. And so employees that wanted that Wisconsin 2 network, like I said, would pay a little bit less out of their paycheck and would have some, use the word, limitations on which provider systems they could access. And it's actually pretty similar to Prevea. And so that Wisconsin 2 sort of narrowed down network or high performance network would be inclusive of Prevea. It would be inclusive of Holy Family. It would have Ascension, which doesn't do a whole lot for you in this geography. It would have Freighter, which in this geography maybe doesn't do a lot for you, but trust me when I say for your, what we call tertiary care needs, or sort of your high cost patients that are needing just expert level of care that maybe a Prevea doesn't have access to, those folks would be able to go to Freighter and Children's Hospital, which is same deal, except 18 years and younger. Very important for families, I would say. And for paying less of a premium, and for having a narrowed down network, and for having to elect a primary care physician, those employees actually get better benefits. They get a $0 deductible, single and family. They have $0 primary care office visits. And so it's meant to be a bit of a trade-off. And from Centivo's perspective, and all the research that they've done, one of the many problems with the healthcare system is it, for years now, has not been guided. Employees are sort of at their own devices to make their own decisions about their healthcare. And most of the time they make poor decisions. I think the math is that 50% of the time when somebody like us, minus maybe a few in the room, like a non-medical professional is given the opportunity to make choices about their healthcare, they make poor ones. And so through this model, Centivo actually forces, and that's a strong word, but I'll use it, it forces the members that select that program to select a primary care physician. And not just any primary care physician, it has to be a good primary care physician as defined by Centivo and their metrics and models to define what a good PCP is. The care of the folks that choose this product needs to be directed through that primary care, that good primary care physician. And for example, if I've got a rash and I immediately want snap reactions, go to the dermatologist. The dermatologist is expensive. Dermatologist is far more expensive than going to a primary care physician. And that rash, maybe that primary care physician's seen that a dozen times in the last 5 weeks and could very well treat that rash themselves. You can see how that sort of concept multiplied exponentially over your 130 employees and 300 members and 12 months of the year starts to add up into some savings. And that's a good part of why Centivo believes that they've just got a bit of a better mousetrap. But Centivo, slightly unlike Prevea, recognizes again in geographies like this and even in Milwaukee, telling people that they can't go to Aurora or that Aurora is not part of the network doesn't sit well with a certain percentage of the population. Aurora and that damn teal roof are everywhere, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. Aurora treats a lot of the Eastern Wisconsin patient base. And so because Centivo recognizes that, they're able to offer this broad HPS network, which is basically what they define as status quo to what you have today with Humana. Prevea doesn't and won't, and stands firmly by the fact that Prevea is not for an employer that wants access to every health care provider. Prevea, Centivo, on the other hand, because it's a self-funded chassis, has the ability to offer a broad network alongside a narrow primary care physician guided network or the Wisconsin 2 platform.
Questions right off?
What you expected on a Friday morning?
So the only thing an employee has to do to get zero deductible is basically go to these particular providers, which is vast, and call their primary physician before going to a specialist.
Yes.
I'm gonna slightly change it. While it's fast, and correct me if I'm wrong, and is if I look at the Centivo and I look at what I will call the Wisconsin 2 plan and the HPS network, the Wisconsin 2 plan is similar to the Prevea plan, but it's more narrow. You can't go to wherever you want. You're much more limited in where you can go, but there's no deductible, there's no copay to the primary care. And so in that respect, from the Wisconsin 2, that's similar to Prevea in that it's narrow. And then the HPS network is extremely similar, if not exactly like what we currently have with Humana. And so with the Centivo model, you're giving the employees the option as to which they want to do, plus their savings to both the employee and the county. But but
in the Prevea model, which is still the number of providers is still vast. You don't see, no matter what, you don't see a benefit to the employees, right?
From a deductible and plan design perspective, that's true.
But under the Centivo, there would be a significant benefit.
There's an option for those that are comfortable in the sort of Prevea Wisconsin 2 network. Yeah, I mean, the missing providers around here, Belland or County Memorial, probably the most notable.
But that would be covered in the HPS network.
If somebody wanted it and was willing to sort of pay
Pay a
up a
little
little bit
extra.
for it. Yes, and I think that is a big deal.
How much, I don't understand how you'd be paying extra if the benefits in the HPS are basically mirroring our current Humana and the annual family cost goes down
Compared to Humana.
compared to Humana.
Right. What will be important and what we'll still need to work out if Centivo ends up being the direction we'd like to go, we want there to be Centivo does, actually they mandate, that there is a discrepancy in how much the employee pays out of their paycheck for the Wisconsin 2 network versus the HPS network. They want there to be sort of a financial incentive or disincentive, however you want to look at it, to either buy up to the broad network or buy down and save money to the narrow network. But sir, I think you are astutely pointing out that the Humana family premium today is $2,700, and I'm telling you, like, the worst case family premium under the Centivo model is $2,560, right? So you are right from a total premium perspective. What will need to be figured out is how do we slice and dice that premium on what the county's going to pay for versus what the employees will pay for. And it probably won't be too far off of the 85-15 split that we have today, but that's to be determined, if I may.
How common is it in your experience? I think just about every insurance plan restricts to some degree anymore which providers you can use.
Well, it has become a bit more common to, I'll just broadly call these narrow network plans versus broad network. I've certainly moved employers, public and private, to these narrow network platforms. They include Aurora, they exclude Aurora. That's kind of Aurora is the big giant, and you either have them or you don't. And they serve a purpose. It's generally financial, and it's generally fairly short-lived. I have lots of groups that I've moved to that narrow network. We've saved some money for a couple of years. The employees, clamor a bit that this doesn't feel great. We'd like to get back to a broad network, and we move back to broad networks. I don't have many groups that stay in that narrow network platform for long. And most groups that I move to that narrow network platform are oftentimes staring down the barrel of a really bad renewal. And so it's like, hey, we got a 20% increase, but we can move to a narrow network for a 5. It's like, well, we're going to do that. I'm going to comment on, I know you spend a ton of money on this stuff. So a 3% increase of a big number is still a big number. But if I'm answering your question, it's out there. I wouldn't say it's extremely common. For example, you've got a couple of employers in this area that are with Prevea. Is it NEW Plastics?
NEW Plastics and DNS.
DNS machine. And so, just to give you a flavor, like, people can do it, have done it, will do it. Just comes down to, the usual HR discussion around employees and culture and sort of disruption, and then finance.
If I may, Mr. Chair, only because Cindy Kinnard is here as well, and I'm not wanting to put her on the spot, but she was part of this employee group that kind of did the renewal. And I think that maybe having Cindy comment on what the group had looked at, what kind of her considerations were in her mind as to when reviewing these types of things, I think is important. And again, part of the reason why is because when we're talking about a narrow network, we're talking about employee disruption and that type of thing, but then also the broad network, as well as having a primary care physician directed type of program. And I think that Cindy can help to enlighten the committee as to what was discussed at this employee group as well, if that's okay with you.
Just one question though. On the Centivo, which high performance, that's the one that does not include Aurora?
Correct.
And the
No
other one?
Aurora, no Bellin, nor Dorcon.
You mean no Bellin?
No Aurora, no Bellin, nor no Dorcon.
Okay, yes, because it'd be
No, Dorcon.
think of it like Prevea.
Okay, but the other one under Centivo does have.
Yeah.
Aurora?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay, Cindy.
Thanks. So I really appreciate being part of the insurance model discussions that we had. And I think I can speak on behalf of the committee that met just a couple days ago, again, relooking at this. And the two plans that we were very much more in favor of than others were either Centivo or where we're at right now with Humana. And the reasons for it obviously were the narrow network was incredibly narrow compared to where we're at now with Prevea. There were a few questions that we didn't get answered yet as far as specialties. Prevea doesn't list whether you can go to a Freighter or a Mayo or a UW in there. And for anyone who is familiar with the Green Bay systems, they're not able to treat everything here. And, you know, I'd be lying to you if I told you that they were. So frequently, a lot of our people get referred out to those kind of systems. So we want to make sure that we have decent coverage in case there is that kind of emergency situation. With Centivo, we do have that ability to go to the freighters, those kind of things. My other concern very much with Prevea and having been in the healthcare system for over 30 years working is that Prevea does not offer every specialty. So for instance, if you need neurosurgery and you're a patient at Prevea, they bring in a team from Aurora. So how is that covered when you're bringing in the Aurora specialists? Are you actually going to have to pay out of pocket for a neurosurgery? Because there's a big price tag on brain surgery, back surgery, those kind of things. So, you know, those were a lot of the concerns that we had looking at that very narrow network. On a county level, I'm a little concerned about not including Bellin. We just signed on a new medical advisor 2 months ago. It took 3 years to find her, and she's a Bellin physician. So if we choose to go outside of that Bellin system, we're going to be starting all over looking for that. And we don't have a lot of options with primary care physicians willing to take a free position to cover a county. That's tough to do. And I think Matt can attest, we use our physician pretty often. You know, every time we have a bloodborne incident, whether that be at the health department, whether that be at the sheriff's department, whether that be in human services, that physician is called upon and we need those services. So, you know, that narrow network, it's narrow. Yes, there are providers in there, but it is narrow. So, you know, overall, I think that Centivo and Humana offer the care that the employees are looking for and give us a little bit more choice in the matter. 50% of all employees would have to start over going to Prevea, you know, finding new physicians, finding new specialists. We have a lot of people that maybe doctor on a chronic condition or a regular basis, and to start over when you've been sick, when you've been severely sick, you have a level of trust in those people that you've chosen, and to start all over is tough. So I'm all for the primary care model.
So I guess looking at the Centivo with the two options for the employees to choose from versus Humana, what we currently have, it does offer some employees a bigger cost savings if they want to go to that narrow selection. If they want to stay in the HPS network, it looks to me like they're still going to save premium and they're going to have all the same coverage without really any disruption. So what would be the negative about going to Centivo?
Do you want me to find, if I'm going to find something, is I can't go straight to a dermatologist. I still have to go to my primary care physician first, and they have to refer me.
Versus a Humana, the current.
Correct. And if I'm having to find something, that's what it is. You would have to take another step. If I have a rash, I can't go straight to the dermatologist. I have to go to my primary care first. Now, again, with what Centivo says, and if I misspeak, Dan, please tell me, is if the primary care has seen this rash and knows what to prescribe, they can prescribe it. If they're not sure, then they can refer you to the dermatologist. So in that respect, it may be one extra step, but in that same respect, you going to the dermatologist costs yourself as well as the county more money than if you had just went to your primary care physician and they could handle it there. And I'm dating myself and I apologize, but way back when HMOs first came about, that's what you had to do anyways. When HMOs first came around, you didn't get to go straight to a dermatologist. You had to go to your primary care to get the referral to go to your dermatologist. And so I think what's happening is you're kind of coming back, it's coming full circle to go back to that way where a doctor is helping to direct your care as opposed to you yourself directing your care, since the primary care physician is more knowledgeable involved.
Which makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with what you're saying at all.
So a recap, that's a lot of information. You could stay with Humana, no cost savings, everybody stays as is.
3.5% increase.
Okay. You could go to Purveya 360. 50% are happy and stick with what they got. 50% are mad at a time when employees are hard to come by and shorthanded, pissing off employees. It would sound like a great idea, let alone cost you more money. Or your Centivo gives you an option to mimic your Humana plan, or give your employees options to save money on the W-2 plan, and it saves the county 11%. Versus going and pissing off some employees and
I don't think you're missing anything.
You
So that's our decision.
Steve, you can do a mic drop right there.
One question
It's
I
that
have,
simple.
one question I have, you said it wasn't determined yet. So compared to the current plan versus the HPS network, could an employee portion, the employee dollars for what they paid increase from this year's?
Yeah, I'd say it's possible. The question was, could in the Centivo model, could the employees per paycheck deduction for their single or family coverage cost them more than what they have today? I would say absolutely not for those that choose the Wisconsin 2 network. And I would say maybe it's going to be some arithmetic behind the scenes. Unlikely, but there will definitely be a cheaper option than what people have today for those that are willing to go into the guided Wisconsin 2 network.
If I may, if I were to make and we can figure out the premiums, if I were to make a recommendation to the committee, and that's maybe where we do it at the second meeting, is it would be my recommendation that we know that there'll be savings in the Wisconsin 2 or the narrow network plan. I would like to see it that we can do it and there's still some savings within the HPS plan. Why? Because if we're already going to be saving, let's call it 11% by allowing for both, then I would think we would want to have both groups share in that savings. Now, some may share into it more because you're in a more narrow network, and I think that's absolutely fair. But in that same respect, if I'm picking the HPS network and it's no different than the Humana network, then why did we change? Then there's no incentive for me to have wanted to change from Humana. And we're still requiring them to go through a primary care physician, correct? Even in the HPS? No, okay. But still, I would, as an incentive, we would want them to save money as well, and then go from there.
So just to be clear, what we just skated over there, the HPS network, you do not need to go to that initial step.
It's basically like what everyone has
It's
today.
just the narrow Wisconsin 2 one.
Correct.
Correct. I misspoke before.
So the employees still have options similar to what they're used to.
Absolutely.
Or the option to save more money.
Correct.
That's how Centivo would describe it. For those of you that want the status quo, go with HPS. Broad network, no primary care requirements. For those that want to save some money and have less out of pockets expenses and are willing to stick within the Purveya Holy Family narrower network, we have the Wisconsin 2 for you.
How many would we anticipate would go in that narrow network?
Centivo expects, and their experience is 50-50 year one. And Centivo, you could probably picture that the long-term desire here from a county and sort of risk management perspective is that the Wisconsin 2 network grows a little bit as Centivo gets contracts with Bellin and with Door County. We get away from HPS and get everybody into the guided primary care Wisconsin 2 network so that we're collectively saving money by having people access care more intelligently, more than today. The willy-nilly go anywhere, do whatever you want, up to the employee thing clearly isn't working. I mean, just read the news. insurance costs are rising at far exceeding CPI and any other, indicator. And so Centivo's coming in saying we gotta do something different. And I'm doing this 11 years and I think you as well, doing it a while, and you as well, sir. Like it's makes a lot of sense. It's sort of like, what took so long?
So if we're looking at the county as a whole is saving 11.7%
Um,
annually.
That's the projection, yes.
So being the self-funded and still going through the Centivo, wouldn't we take that cost savings and pass that on to the employees? Because don't we want to kind of be at a balance?
Again, the choice is up to the committee. My recommendation would be is that we share in the savings in that and I'm just going to do it from simple math standpoint. If a premium is $1,000 and we're saving 15%, which means that we're saving $150, my suggestion would be the county saves 85% of it, the employee saves 15% of it. No different than what we do with the premium. If the county's paying 85% of the premium and the employee is paying 15% of the premium, whatever the savings is should be roughly 85-15.
So again, the employees going to the Centivo are going to gain a savings as well. They're going to have a
Be better
realization
off
of savings.
financially, yes.
So there is no reason to stay on Humana from what I'm seeing.
That it's your choice.
We didn't have to decide today is the first thing I heard, so.
No, I guess I don't want it to, it's not for me to dictate. If you're asking which I would recommend, I would recommend Centivo. I think it's in the long run putting us to the right way in that we're doing work. Hopefully we get more folks to do primary care physician directed. And the more that we can steer folks to a more narrow network provides us more savings. But in that same respect, I don't want to dictate and cut off choice. And Cindy had brought up some very important points in that if we have something in a narrow network where that network can't provide that service, and now you have to get it someplace else, it's just like you had no insurance. And so whatever savings you got here just got wiped out.
That would be the employee's decision to go on that narrow network.
Correct.
I mean, it's like anything, it's risk assessment.
Correct.
How much insurance is too much and how
Right.
much is not enough?
But if we forced them to go to the narrow network, that's a different story.
Did you say Centivo's only been in the state about 5 years?
Centivo's been in the state probably not that long, 18, 24 months. But they've written some very large employers, Northwestern Mutual,
So really, there's not any history of their service, or their
not-
performance, or their ability to maintain level premiums or any of that kind of stuff.
So not here in Wisconsin, but they started on the East Coast and they've had 5 years of success on the East Coast. And heck, I'm sure we could get their CEO, Ashok, same as Dr. Rye's name.
Yes.
On the phone to sort of talk through their success and their model and how they are seeing what we call like a bending of the trend. I mean, forever it's just like this, and they're not saying it's going to go like this, but just do something to sort of curb the 8 to 12% trend increases every year. So they are young, not denying that, right? But they are young, but I do believe that they've got good results thus far.
Okay. Is there an option out there for the guided care with the HBS network? That seems like the best of.
I know. No. Well, they have a Wisconsin One network, which is guided. It might exclude somebody. I think what their intent would be is HPS offers, like I said, the status quo for some people that are just uncomfortable with change and aren't ready for change. Year 2, maybe we get rid of HPS, offer Wisconsin 1 and Wisconsin 2, and maybe in time we just get down to like a more focused Wisconsin 2. But this is they've had a lot of success with this as a jumping off point. See, unlike Prevea, who doesn't have the ability to offer a broad network, and it sort of has conversations like this. And these guys, some people allows, sort of the best of both worlds.
If I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
at least what I've heard so far from the committee, and I want to be clear, is that where I see the preference going right now from the committee is to explore the Centivo, so therefore to provide information to the committee. I think that administration would need to work with Horton as to what would those employee premiums be for Centivo under the Wisconsin 2 and the HPS system, and compare them to what they would be under. So the current system, here's what it is with the 3.5%. Here's what the new premium would be under Humana. Here's what the 2 premiums would be under Centivo, depending on if the employee picked the narrow Wisconsin 2 plan or the broad HPS plan. Is that a fair assessment of what I'm kind of getting from the committee? Okay, I wanted to be sure. So then I'm going to assume that within the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that we would meet again and we would look at Humana, we'd look at Centivo, we'd look at the premiums and the deductibles or the benefits within that. And then this committee would make a decision as to which option. Is that also fair?
I think that's important information that we need to make the right.
Now, the one thing I want to be clear of, because I don't want to be therefore omitting something that you still want to talk about. I am taking Prevea 360 and it's going to the side. We are not considering it. We are considering Centivo and we're considering Humana. Is that a fair assessment of the committee as well?
Does anybody want to have Prevea? I don't.
Personally, I see no reason to
I just wanted to be clear, because if I were to not do that, I didn't want the committee thinking that I'm purposely omitting any information.
The other thing I would, this is something we decide later, but if, for example, we would go to Centivo, is there going to be some opportunity to educate the employee on which plan they should?
Absolutely. What would happen is we would have mandatory meetings that the employees have to come and therefore hear the information of both plans.
Solid plan?
Okay. I just wanted to be sure.
Can we look at a date?
Yes, we can.
Can we look at a date to go over?
If you want to, Mr. Chair, and I'm not sure what Mr. Mongovin's, I don't believe, do we have a finance committee meeting before board?
That would be a great time to do it.
That was my thought.
18th, not right now.
Could we meet an hour prior to the county board meeting?
On the 18th?
Supervisor Vollewater get another meeting in there.
It'll be 5 o'clock on the 18th.
If that's okay with the committee.
Better have a free evening somewhere we could fill up.
How about Wednesday?
Yeah.
I'm hearing no otherwise. So
Is that okay with you, Steve?
October
Yeah.
15th at 5.
John?
Hopefully, yes, I'm sorry, October 18th at 5. Yes.
Yeah, or we say the county board meeting.
I think
Is that-
probably.
Is that enough time?
I think it's enough time because we're doing the numbers. The only question that again I have for the committee is that I'm not sure that of Mr. Mongovin's availability. I think right now we're more talking numbers than anything else. So if that's okay with you, he may not be able to attend.
Maybe on the phone in, I'll figure it out. I think we did make a lot of progress today, and my part, and sooner than later, is good with me, just given that we're going to be making a transition for the first time in the county's, a couple of decades, and we already have meetings and paperwork, et cetera. 18th sounds good. Whether I'm here physically to be determined, but I'm just a cog in the wheel. I can get you the data that you need.
I think personally though, right, it's gonna be more than numbers,
Yes.
just looking at what the employees would be under the 3% or 3.5%, whatever
Yep.
it was, versus what the
Exactly.
people would be.
I think that's easy enough for us to get to you prior. So, all right. Thank
Sounds
you,
like a
Mr.
plan.
Chair. Dan, thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you all. Thank you.
All right.
Next, we're going to.
So we're gonna,
winter parking.
we'll address this again at 5 o'clock. The next topic on the agenda is the Winter Park agreement, or the actual agreement, and there's a proposed lease agreement attached.
Yeah,
You're gonna take the lead on that?
I'll take the lead, and then if there are questions, I have Mr. Myers here as well. So currently, in fact, Dave, I'm gonna put you on the spot and have you sit next to me. I'm gonna put you on the spot and have you sit next to me. Yes.
Hopefully you don't take one.
Exactly. So I believe it's time that we revisit the agreement between the Winter Park Association and the county. I'm not sure, has there been a written agreement?
There is, well back in when the park was created, there's an old MOU.
So this reminds me eerily similar to the fair board when we did that contract, because that was back from 1980, I believe is what it was. So I believe that the committee needs to be looking at and approve and give guidance as to a new agreement with Winter Park. And I think there's a number of reasons for this. For those that may be unaware or have not been out to Winter Park in a while, we have a number of different places. We have both the tubing hill and the skiing hill. There's also folks in the chalet and folks in the ski rental building. Currently, the current agreement between the Winter Park Association and the county is that the Winter Park Association and the county split the revenue from the tube hill 50-50. From the ski hill, we split it 80% for Winter Park and 20% for the county. And any concessions and rentals are 100% to the Winter Park Association and 0 to the county. Now, in looking at a staffing standpoint, and that's why I added or gave you this, is that from the tubing standpoint, the county staffs the entire tube hill, which depending on how many that is, can be anywhere to 3 to 5 people. At the ski hill, it is a minimum of 3 people. And again, the county staff provides all staffing there. In the chalet, that is, and in the ski rental building currently, the Winter Park Association staffs those 2 locations, and the county staff does not staff any there. And as you can see from the other sheets in there, we have an attendance just last year in Winter Park of over 14,000 people. I'm sorry, over 16,000 people. 14,000 on the tube hill and 2,000 on the ski hill. And so from a revenue standpoint, we're now talking just in 2022, which was 21 and 22, revenue of almost $190,000. This is no longer a small dollar kind of weekend enterprise. This is, I'm going to call it, this is a real business. And therefore, I believe that because it's being done on county property and the county staff are the ones that are staffing the majority of the locations that help the Winter Park to operate during the winter months, is that there has to be an updated Winter Park agreement. In the Winter Park agreement that I had Mr. Depo draft, I asked him to put into the contract that the county would retain 100% of the tube hill revenues. And again, the reason behind that is because the county staffs all of that location. And go, someone was gonna ask something.
What does the Winter Park Association do with the funds they receive? Where do they go?
All the funds that they have received go back into the park. So they've done a number of upgrades, magic carpet being probably the most notable one. That was 5 years ago as of last season, which everything I have a whole list of things they've upgraded, but many buildings, they've made the park in essence, but everything they make goes back into it.
They've invested everything back in.
Correct. Yep.
And then with the Tube Hill, the current, I left that as open for negotiation. Again, it's currently 80-20. I'm sorry, Ski Hill is 80-20, but county staffs 100% of the Ski Hill. And as for concessions and rentals, because the Winter Park does that they would receive 100% of those revenues. I think the part that also needs to be considered is that there's a couple different things here. One is that this is the only nonprofit group where essentially the county is funding them. When I think of the Zoological Society, they have to do Zubilee, they have to do Zoo Park. The county does that. We don't have a revenue source that the county then shares with those other nonprofits. And the part that is extremely difficult is that the Winter Park Association, yes, from its history, in essence, kind of created Winter Park. They did. They put in the time, they put in the effort. But I think now is the time that we need to have a serious conversation as to how the park is improved, what equipment is bought, those types of things, and it has now gotten to the level where the county needs to take a more active role in the management of the park and the collection of those revenues.
So what, do we have a spreadsheet on this profit loss?
As for,
Well, I mean, what are our expenses? We've got insurance expense, we've got fuel expense, we've got employee expense. There's a lot of expenses. I mean, the gross looks great.
correct,
And are we looking at setting this up like an enterprise fund?
Yes, it should be its own fund because if you look at the snow groomers and the snow machines, whatever you make snow, they're getting old. They're gonna need to be replaced. Those are not inexpensive items. And there's what, 4 or 5 snow tons, and you'll need one good groomer. And we're talking well over 50,000 for each one of those.
The other issue,
This is something I threw together this morning, which shows, again, the Winter Park operates on the winter season. We have financial reports on a calendar basis. So I threw this together to say, where did the last year, season-wise, end up? I can't do it for farther beyond that because it's a limit of our old accounting system. So that, for the last season, starting in October, wrapping off the following September, we took in a total of 97,000 of revenue, but that includes 19,000 of the loan payback for the magic carpet. So that really is good. And we had 75,000 expenses. If we exclude that loan payback, we
Broke even.
we gained $2,100.
Does that include paying the association? Is the
The
association fees
association
taken out
collects
of
the
here?
money and never gives it, so it's never in there.
It's never in there.
Right. Now, again, keeping up, there's major repairs happening now to the groomer, and those equipment plus other stuff is only getting older.
So is there any, so this is not an enterprise fund yet, so there is no money in the bank in the fund for like capital improvements that we're talking about?
No, that would come out of the budget process and during a routine budget, or the association would buy it out of the funds that they have.
But it should be coming out of its own profits.
Yes. So part of this would be we'd set up its own fund.
and the difficulty, at least what I see, Supervisor Fuller, is that from doing it from a 50-50 standpoint, this would have been the first year we break even, and those, I'm gonna guess, don't necessarily cover administrative costs, isn't putting away money for equipment replacements, those types of things. And so, again, before it was a nice amenity to have, it has now gotten to the level, because of the work that Mr. Myers and his staff has done, that we now have to think about it as truly a county enterprise. And therefore, I believe that it's in the county's best interest that, one, from now on, it collects the money and then would then disperse money to the Winter Park Association. And in that same respect, that the percentages of revenue be amended as well.
I believe everybody here probably recognizes how much work that organization's put into
Correct.
creating where it is. And recognizing that's why I want to make sure personally that when we go forward with this, that's not like dissolved, you know what I mean?
Correct.
So the current equipment that's there now, the snow guns, the groomer, all that just came out of general fund?
Well, some of it was donated. It was purchased and donated, but anything that would be replaced would come out of the CIP and out of county funds, yes.
What is Mr. Myers' thoughts on this? Has anybody talked to the association?
The association's aware that we're looking at an agreement. I mean, I think they would recognize, if you went back 10 years ago, even nobody thought we'd be where we're at today. I mean, we've done a really good job boosting that park, getting media out there, getting people to come here. My concern, which I believe the contract would address, is that I want to make sure we can afford to keep the park going when we have equipment go down and we have a fund set up for that. So that money coming in would keep this park. And I think Winter Park would most likely agree that they want to see this park succeed and keep going that way for years to come. So that's what I want to see happen.
What are their biggest concerns then, other than the longevity of the park? What are their concerns?
I think we really need to sit down. I mean, this is kind of a first draft of this.
So there
and
hasn't
have
been a
this discussion.
conversation with the association.
Well, part of the reason why is I wanted to have some conversation with this committee, no different than what we did with the fair contract, is that I wanted some guidance from this committee prior to talking with the fair board. For those that were on previously, I had approached the finance committee and said, here's what I'm thinking, here are the items that I would like to discuss. And prior to the discussion then with the fair board, I received authorization that yes, we are open to these types of things. And then brought it back to the finance committee for final approval. The other part that I think that we need to look at as well is, and this is a concern that I have, is I absolutely agree with you 100%, Jeff, is that the Winter Park Association helped to make Winter Park. Won't disagree. My concern is I have to think beyond the Winter Park Association, in the respect that its involvement and its vitality was much stronger. And I think it continues to wane because of the number of volunteers that they're able to recruit is starting to dwindle as the years go by. And the fear that I have then is that the county is therefore losing some of its ability to maintain the park from a revenue standpoint, because we would be depending upon a nonprofit association that may be waning in strength.
Well, and we have the auditors, I'm sure, when we were looking at this kind of dollars, the security of those funding and what's going on is another issue. And Dave, I don't know what else with this agreement that we should be looking at.
Well, I don't know if the agreement has actually been distributed to everybody yet, but I encourage that to happen at some point as well. It does address a lot of those issues. I think one of the biggest issues, especially looking forward, is that you have an association that has full control over revenues generated in the county park. Problem I see with that, it's probably obvious, is that if they decide, the association decides that they want to do something in the park, they're going to buy equipment to do something in the park, and the county says, we can't do that. There's no way we're going to do that. They may have spent $100,000 on a piece of equipment that the county's not going to put in the park. So to not have, and I'm not saying that that's happening, but it could, and it would be the only entity making those decisions. I think that it's pretty clear, there's been a good relationship so far. And I think you're right, you don't want to damage that relationship. But at the same time, to Dave's point, I don't know how you sustain the park going forward, depending completely on another entity that can basically do what it wants.
I have a question. How does Winter Park explain the revenues tax-wise?
They have, well, as
Are
any
they-
nonprofit.
Are they a 501(c)(3)?
Yeah, I've got the tax
Are
return.
they a
on my desk.
3C or C3 or a C4?
I honestly don't know. I have the tax returns on my desk. Make sure they file them. Make sure it's,
Because I mean, you got some $1,000s coming through their checkbook.
Yeah, so I mean, if they're an entity, like, they gotta obviously be filing for 990.
Yeah.
You know, and the 990, they gotta do that, it's gonna be the EZ form, it's anything over $50,000 in revenues.
you know, it's not the postcard.
No postcard with them.
And I guess that's where, John, is the concern is, we've now gone to the next level. And so when we talk, as Mr. Defo had said, when we talk about the purchasing of equipment, the county needs to be in the lead as to what equipment gets purchased.
Yeah, and who's fixing it?
And again, I try to do the analogy to the zoo. If there's going to be improvements to the zoo, while there is money from the Zoological Society, from the zoo group, it's the Parks Department that takes the lead as to what improvements will or will not happen because it's county work. And in that same respect, if there would be any type of equipment or otherwise that would be purchased, again, the county's the one that would take the lead. And I think that's where the county more and more from Winter Park is taking the lead on staffing, is taking the lead on improvements, is taking the lead on those type of issues. So in that respect, with that taking of the lead and being the responsible party, I think that the money has to follow that responsibility.
Some of the other important things, other than just the money, is the decision making, right? So you have an organization that's collecting revenue from the property with the intent of bettering the property or continuing to run the property. There needs to be an agreement about directing, right? So who gets to decide whether or not trees are cut, whether or not soil is moved, a bill is made, all of that stuff. Some discussion on that. Obviously, the county is the party that's able to make those decisions. I think that's
Here's your
Yeah,
question.
you want to have Dave explain how his crew and Dave repaired some of that snow equipment just recently and saved the county a large chunk of money.
I'll let Dave do that.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, we have, the snow groomer was purchased before my time. I want to say at the tune of probably $80,000. It was a used piece of equipment. Now, that was like 10, 12 years ago. Now, if you take that same piece of equipment, obviously a lot more. But we have equipment, I believe it's from 98. So our tiller on there, that's what we use we level the snow. If there's a bucket in front, we take that tiller, grind everything up and make a good skiable and tubable surface that, has seen, being from 98 and going through a lot of use, got beat up pretty bad. So we have some staff that are very mechanically inclined that can fix that. On the back of that, basically we have 2 tumblers with tines on it. And there's gears, bearings, and not mechanics sorry, inside of that. But to send that up to get fixed right now, our tines are really wore off. It started like this, now they're like that. So we had a guy come in, he re-welded everything back, built those tines back, rebuilt the entire thing, finding parts ran us. We're still getting parts, but probably around the tune of $4,000 just for parts. That's before the time went into it. But sending it in to get fixed, each of those drums would have cost us a minimum of $7,500 just to get those T3 capped. and that's finding someone to do it. You're shipping that stuff out to Colorado, wherever that is. So, I mean, we would have looked at just getting the 2 drums fixed, $15,000 without the bearings, without the parts, and then, shipping and everything else. So, at the end of the day, that was in our budget request for next year, but we couldn't make it last another year. So we made a decision to do that right now, but that's going to save us. I'm going to guesstimate we probably save 10 to 15,000 doing that ourselves
And
versus
we,
sending it out.
and we want to be sure that when we talk about future equipment, because the county's the one operating it, the county's the one maintaining it, is that the county is the one deciding, do we want to buy a used machine or a new machine? And that's where it comes to the decision-making part of it, that because of the responsibility that the county would then, it would be incumbent upon the county, is that there needs to be kind of that change. And also, and I'm sorry, and are there more questions at all regarding the agreement? Because I also did want to quick talk about the lease in there.
Just on the agreement, I noticed the initial verbiage in the agreement on page 4, I guess. Talks about the tube rental is going to be 100%, proposed 100% to the county.
Correct.
The association will get 100% of the concessions
And the rentals, yep.
and the rentals. And then there's going to be, we're going to have a discussion on the split between, or you guys have a recommendation on ski.
I'll be completely honest with you, Mr. Rondon, is that I left that open because I know that this, currently it's 80% to Winter Park, 20% to the county. And I know that this is a very sensitive subject to members of the Winter Park Association. Why? Because they put in a lot of years, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And so I understand the emotion that's attached to it. And so if it remains as 80-20, though we do all of the staffing, in the big picture, I'm okay. Why? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, from the history standpoint, one of the big purposes of the group was to provide skiing, even more than the tubing. So if they want to keep the 80-20, or if it's 50-50 or something, I'm open to whatever that number is, and having that discussion with the Winter Park Association. And I guess that's the only reason why I left that one kind of open. The Winter Park does the staffing of the chalet and of the rental building, so of course they get 100%. We staff all of the hill. I believe we should get 100% of the tubing hill. And while we do staff 100% of the ski hill, if eventually that continues to get better, it wouldn't be the county providing a ski patrol or someone else. So there would be some responsibilities incumbent upon the Winter Park Association. So that's why I believe that I'm open, and I would ask that the county be open to figuring out what that number might be.
There's a question I got as I'm looking at this. And I'm assuming that the sales here are net sales, not gross.
Correct.
That was.
So if you're looking, what I have there, they don't, last year, I used this last season because it was our most successful season. And before we've been building up to this point, but like their magic carpet loan payment back to the county is in their gross part of that. So they paid that. I'm gonna round up $20,000 back to the county. So there's and there's no equipment costs in there, and ski rental equipment, anything like that. That's not figured in that share they have. I strictly did just gross sales on that breakdown. Gross revenue.
What did that magic carpet cost?
Shy of 100,000.
Of which the county loaned the money to the Winter Park Group.
And they repaid the county.
And then they, over 5 years?
5 years. Yep, 5 years. And they installed it, set it up. So I mean you can tell, if you look at the attendance numbers I had that sheet, I don't know if that went out to everybody, but I mean, you can kind of see when the magic carpet went in, what the jump was. At the time we thought that was a great idea to try it, and obviously that idea definitely paid off. I mean, that's drawn a lot of people that.
What is this magic carpet?
Think of it as the
You don't
escalator.
have to walk
That's
up
what-
the
you don't-
stairs
you don't-
like
Oh,
that.
yeah, yeah.
You don't have to walk up the stairs.
I've just seen the ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had the T-bar, or not T-bar, the rope tow before you go down and went up. Now you just stand and go up.
And there's one other item within the packet. It has to do with the lease agreement. And the purpose of the lease agreement is that there are times that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Myers, there are times that Winter Park wants to do night skiing, of which then they staff it, they do that type of work, and okay, in that respect, then we can lease them the hill for $1 and let them keep any and all profits for that. And again, since they're staffing it, then why not let them keep all the revenues? But it would be similar to any other group that would be renting a piece of county property. And so I wanted that to be as an option as well, because there are times that the association has asked that the hill be available for night skiing.
Can I clarify that?
Sure.
So on the ski hill side that Scott's talking about, typically we're open to the public Saturday and Sunday only on skiing. And usually we're 10 to 4, 11 to 4 Saturday and Sunday. At times, the association will have night skiing on Saturday nights, kind of above and beyond what we normally have for hours, and they handle the operation night skiing just on the ski hill, not the tube hill.
Did I say to be?
No, I'm just
Okay, good.
clarifying, so they all know, not everybody skis. But they would operate that, they do that now with their own staff, or their own volunteers.
So I guess
It varies through, it's a couple times a year usually they do it.
So I guess the reason that I brought this forth and had given a heads up probably about a couple months ago, and I've now brought it to the committee is kind of the broad strokes that I put forth within the agreement. Are there any major concerns with the committee with regards to what has been put into the agreement prior to me having myself and Mr. Myers having the conversation with the Winter Park Association?
Liability on insurance?
Unless it's night skiing, and then again, if they're then renting it out, then they would have to hold the liability.
And that was part of the agreement, is that if they're gonna hold an event exclusive to their club, that they're gonna have to cover the services.
So they have their own liability insurance for when they have night skiing?
They will have to. I don't, with this.
I mean, it's what they do now.
Right.
Covers it currently.
I'm sorry,
County covers insurance currently.
So
during normal operations, private parties. And that's the other part is Dave and his group, if there's a lot of school groups that use that will come and use the Tube Hill. And that is solely operated by the county, every part of it. And currently, we share those profits with the Winter Park Group. And that is specifically just private groups that the county then does the operation.
I'm sorry, we're not clear down on this end. They've had night skiing, they currently have it. They have.
They've always had night skiing. since
Okay,
it's started going.
but, so they have insurance then.
Yeah, I would say,
I
correct me
was
if I'm
getting the
wrong,
impression we don't seem to be clear on that.
I don't know if they do or don't. I don't.
So
I
we
seen
haven't,
any
we
documentation
haven't
for that.
verified that they do, but they've had night skiing.
Well, there hasn't been an agreement in place prior to this. other than-
But if they're renting it or they're using it,
They're under us.
they're under our
Plain and
insurance.
simple,
So we're
they're under
covering it
us.
right
We
now.
are
Yes.
covering
so
it.
they've had night skiing and we're covering it
Yeah.
currently.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Now that's clear.
Yep.
That part I understand. I just,
Are we looking at any restrictions on this night skiing? I mean, they could have night skiing Thursday, Friday, Saturday if they wanted, or?
If they want to staff it, it doesn't
They'd
bother
have to
me.
find the volunteers, that would be the.
That would be the
hard
tricky part of it. Yeah, historically, it's always been Saturday nights.
As
'Cause
long
that
as-
makes the most sense.
As long as it doesn't interfere with tubing, which you have night groups on Thursdays.
that's
Yeah.
not
And
predictable.
we would still have, it is still a rental agreement. So as the county, we would still have the ability to say, no, it's not gonna work on this, somebody else is doing something. You know, we're not gonna bump school.
Well, I think it would have to be scheduled to the parks director, it would be my
Right.
guess, right? That's.
Right, so, the other thing is, we would dictate minimum staffing even if. So if you don't have enough people to make sure you do this safely, then you should.
But we're currently exposed to liability on this. I mean, they're doing night skiing, we're paying, it's under our policy.
And I don't want to quote rec immunity, you're more of an expert on that, but I mean, skiing typically is a recreational immunity coverage in the state of Wisconsin. So we're not, our liability, we have an ATV park, we have, we have liability for a lot of different properties. I don't think that really changes with this versus anything else. Except, lift operations where we've never had an issue. I mean, I just say, I mean, that's where you run into a liability issue with something like that, but.
On the lift operations, not necessarily on skiing.
Yeah, I would say skiing, unless we create unsafe conditions, I mean, we're basically covered under recreational immunity, so.
So again, asking if I may, Mr. Chair, is there any concerns with what I proposed to the committee and I was, unless there are concerns, I would then be bringing this forward to Winter Park Association for discussion and then bring back the final contract for approval if that meets with the committee's wishes.
Is there any preference to putting a number out there on the split for the ski hill and what the rental might be, or is that something that we should let you guys negotiate?
I think we should get a nickel on every can of pop.
You take and work that out and come back to us.
Because I, like you said, and everybody said, we want to make sure that we're not sliding the association.
Correct.
I guess the other thing is, when we talk about rates, rental fees, chairlift fees, whatever we're charging the public, are we gonna have a say in that? I mean, they can make a proposal, but it'll either be approved by you or finance or both.
So if I may get, so right now, county sets the rates.
Okay.
The county sets the rates. Currently, right now, it's for both skiing and otherwise, because it is.
I'll correct you.
Well, the county does, but.
We have finance, when we went through fees last year, we raised the swimming fees, we control that. The ski rental fees, since the association handles the ski rental equipment, they purchase it. We don't, county hasn't bought any skis or anything like that. They take care of that wholly.
I'm sorry, the rental and the concessions.
Yeah, and
yes.
they were responsible for that. We did let them set their ski lift ticket rate, which they increased last year to go along with the 2 tickets, which we get a percentage of, but I don't see
Yeah,
where that.
we set the 2 rates. I would even, while we say it, ultimately set the ski rates as well.
But
You
also
may
to
not
be
come to
clear,
rental.
that the rental equipment
Is theirs.
paid for by fees generated from the park.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, like I
So
said, the county
is it actually county equipment purchased by the association?
I think that's a great legal question.
Well, I mean, that's an important thing to know because it's paid for by proceeds generated from the park. And if they're willing to put in money to the park, that's all great. And that's the spirit of their mission. But then it in turn becomes county property.
That's what
Agreement.
sorry.
Hard to prove.
Well, we're gonna have it, make sure that type of thing is in here, that whatever is put into the park becomes county property. If I donate a park bench with my money, it still becomes county property.
We definitely have that for pieces of equipment, like the groomer and those types of things. I'm not sure, and I'd have to go back and take a look. As for skis and poles, that I'm not sure that it has or hasn't.
I don't know if it's ever been discussed.
But it needs to be.
Yeah.
Now that we're going to the
Yeah.
next level and you guys are gonna meet with them, that needs to be clear that all of a sudden things don't go away.
You gotta say the same thing for the tubes.
Well,
Everything.
The tubes we bought.
Well, we bought,
They cost shared with those.
But they give a donation.
Yeah.
There you go.
That
It's a
would be
donation,
great.
which
Yeah.
becomes county
And
property.
purchased through the county.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I don't know if they bought any skis.
They buy ski rental equipment as needed throughout the year.
Okay.
So,
So if I'm understanding the committee, if I may, Mr. Chair, is that except for, I'll call it the rental equipment, that, that the agreement looks satisfactory right now. Come back after your discussion with Winter Park Association to what the percentages will be for the ski hill and what other concerns that Winter Park may or may not have for an approval of a final contract. Is that a fair assessment of the wishes of the committee?
Are we targeting January 1 of 2023 to start this? or-
Well, we'd like to try to do it prior.
Before that?
We want to do it
Before the snow
for
flies?
this season. So we would like to try to have this all finished up, that you would approve this contract by no later than November.
We do try to be open late December. Before Christmas break, if Mother Nature allows us.
So at our regular November finance meeting, we could do that.
Well, we're doing it we're approving the budget on the first, and then after that, honestly, because we're doing that so early, we could have a finance meeting. We wouldn't have to have it the first Friday of November. We could have it almost any Friday of November. I just wouldn't pick the Friday after Thanksgiving.
Sure, why not? I gotta work, so should everybody else.
When we get there, we'll. First Friday is the 4th, the next would be the 11th.
I'm fine with that. If the committee's fine with that, Mr. Chair.
We'll discuss that when we get there. but looking at the 11th. Okay, any other questions on the agreement? Has everybody had a chance to review these or? Okay, then if there's any substantial changes, you'll have updated copies. And all the
Absolutely.
numbers will be in there and we'll be ready to rock and roll.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for bringing this forward.
Well, like I said,
Dave,
I have to applaud Barry and the whole Winter Park Association for the work that they've done and what they've created. It's now gotten to the level that we have to make changes.
Well, they made a dream a reality.
Thank you. And now the county, because the county will have to maintain that reality, we need to have a proper agreement. In fact, you said it perfect.
an agreement still maintaining the good relationship. with the
Correct.
County and the association.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's go back to the agenda. Item 6, Paul, you want to do the financials, and then Scott on overtime and medical.
Sure, my part will be short this time.
Wow.
Sales tax, most recent payment was 149,800, year to date 896,355, compared to a year ago, 839. So still increasing. Contingency, the actual balance there is 69,363. There's a few items that we might need to take out at year end. That hasn't changed from last month. Individual department wise, there's no new departments. You know, we discussed the probate and line information, everybody. Nothing new has come up. We will see this again next month when some of those, most of those, will have a request for adjustment. The sheriff routinely does because it's a $5 million department, $5 million department, and there are always changes like that. The two in there that are up in the air, the cost of purchasing squad cars and of course fuel, but that will come up next month. So everything important, I guess we'll see next month, or hasn't changed from last month. So that's it for this time. Unless there's questions.
For medical, dental, and large claimant, again, for, as of the end of August, for medical, we're at 93%. So we're still under our claims versus premiums. For dental, we're at 94%. So again, under our claims versus premiums. And as for large claimants, we have 11 that are 50% or above our stop loss. We have 5 that have exceeded our stop loss of 55. I do project that we'll have another 2 or 3 I know of at least a couple, 2 or 3 employees that are going to be having surgeries, major surgeries, so that may bring us above the stop loss. But from that standpoint, I believe that everything right now is looking good. Unless there's questions. And then for overtime, again, nothing that really pops out. Part of the, again, as the sheriff had talked about before, you did see that our actual right now is equal to what our budget is. Yet it is not, if you look at 20 and 21, it's still kind of within that range. The sheriff had talked at the last executive committee meeting that with the vacancy of the jail cook position, that some overtime is being used to help cover some of those hours, because when inmates have to be fed, someone's got to prepare those meals, and for right now, we don't have folks to do that, so at times we have jailers filling in some of those hours.
Questions? Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Item 7, veteran services budget request, document scanning.
Yes.
Information provided on using and the cost. So somebody want to cover that?
Want me to do it or you do it?
I can see the cost is there, and the rest of the reasons why and what it is.
Yeah. As we're seeing right now, as government in general is becoming more and more, and actually human services is doing the same thing, where you're trying to have less and less paper files and you're having more electronic files, that in the Veteran Service Office, we're trying to make all those files go digital. And so to do that type of scanning and getting that done, that's going to cost just a little bit under $11,000. But the department does have the funds within its current budget to do that scanning and get that scanning completed. You have the information there in front. He did go out to 4 different companies and get costs that were needed, and therefore he has made the selection, and the cost again is about 11,000, but we have well over 16 to cover that cost.
So being on that committee and having that conversation and recommending it to come to finance, it is the trend, as we all know, everything is going digital. Accessibility is a big thing. He can get a veteran's record if he's at a site visit with a veteran. He can access that veteran's records. When transferring things either in or out, it makes it a lot easier. And again, he's had a cost savings being an employee down that I think it's going to all be covered then within his budget. So.
So I'd recommend a motion for approval.
So there,
Sure.
so obviously there's going to be some annual maintenance on this program. So that'll be in his normal operating budget going forward.
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Moved by Jeff, second by Virginia, to approve the request for $10,900 for digital scanning in the VA office, with funds coming from the current VA budget, or the Veterans Affairs budget.
And I just have one more comment on that. So the biggest concern that I had was safeguarding these files, that they don't just get poof. And there were a number of different backups that are saved. You know, this is in the cloud, so the accessibility is there, but there's a number of different backups that these records are kept at. So.
Any questions on the motion? Otherwise, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, hearing none, motion carried. Thank you, guys. Let's see. Next one will be, I went out of order.
No, you didn't. It's number 8.
Okay, number
You're
eight.
good.
Your tracker.
What proposed 2023 budget adjustments?
October of each year, we routinely go through this. So what happens is the administrator gave his proposal. Between now and November, things do come up, either decisions or just updates of numbers. And since it's already been handed off to the finance committee now makes a decision to change or not change based on that. Some of these are routine, some not so much. So I guess I'll just start with the top. Top one is very routine. That one never comes before the administrator's budget is approved. State share revenue and utility tax come from the state of Wisconsin. That one came a few days after the book was published. And overall, there's gonna be $7,000 less of utility tax. That's not a terribly predictable number, I can guess, but last year was in a few hundred, this year it's 7,000. There is money in the transfer to fund balance. Most of that is intended to cover what the sheriff would need to transition to the new jail. 7,000 certainly isn't gonna take away from that. So the entry is to reduce then the amount transferred to fund balance when we reduce the utility tax. Want me to go through all of these or? Okay.
To me, they're pretty acceptable.
Okay.
I think what he's asking, Mr. Chair, is do you want to vote on them as a group or do you want to vote on them individually?
I think we can do them as a body.
Number B, the highway, roads and bridges, transportation aids, that number actually hasn't come yet, so we'll skip over that one. I do know where most of those numbers come from. I'm anticipating about an $80,000 increase. But until that statement comes, usually it's here late September, early October. This year, it's not here yet. There's one number and there's a percentage of how they split it. That one's not predictable at all. But they look at a 6-year average. The 6-year average has gone up. And from that, we'll get about 80,000 more. But we'll wait for that one when it actually comes. Item C, in the administrator's proposed budget was a 4% cost of living increase and 1.5% stipend. Executive committee actually voted to approve a 3% cost of living with steps. This is the summary of that net change. I do have to have it by department. That's about 6 pages. If you want to see that, I can share that. But the grand total is this entry here. Again, the offset to that, because we're not spending as much for everybody but the highway, there's a savings of 97,000. I here would suggest that we reduce the amount human services is using a fund balance. That 240 fund balance was because of those cases that were kind of dropped in their lap. It may or may not happen. They would by January 1st probably be above the 15% in their fund balance. But I don't think we need to spend that. If we have the extra money, the 97,000, I think could reduce the amount that they're anticipating to fund balance. And then of course, the highway portion of that would reduce highway revenue. So I just adjusted one revenue for the highway internal service fund for their portion of it. Item D, last month, the executive committee voted to change the, I've got overtime, that's actually holiday pay. The changing holiday pay for the jailers who work on the holiday to be paid as overtime. So there was a cost to that. So that came out to in 2023 rates, 16,000 and change, plus a few benefits for a total of $19,290. And again, that amount can be taken out of that transfer to fund balance without impacting what the sheriff needs to do while transitioning to the new jail. Which leads to item E, transitioning to new jail staffing. That was discussed at Tuesday's executive committee, and their request was to add to start training 2 jailers early in the year, 2 midway through the year, and also some called transition for the senior jailer staff to become union members and not lose their spot, I guess is the best way I can explain it. So that would be the cost of that in 2023. F, that little amount there, that's just housekeeping for me. Emergency management has that mobile command post, that RV that they ride, that they have for responding. There was some amount of money given a number of years ago from other municipalities that was stuck in its own fund. That actually has been spent last week. Normally I wouldn't care about $100. But if I get that out of the 2023 budget, I can close and get rid of that fund 1 year earlier. So all it is housekeeping. It doesn't need to be its own fund. So if we would get that money again, we just make it a part of the emergency management budget. And the very last item on there, item G, this is brand new. The US Treasury has a new program, I guess we'll call it a new revenue source. They announced in July. Details on their bag, they're not a whole lot better now, but a couple of days ago, they actually released a list of counties that are getting more revenue, and all we have to do is ask for it. So the Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund. Kewaunee County is on the list of counties, and we will get $50,000 in 22 and again in 2023. After that, it's unknown. So the source, this is revenue sharing, so it's not a grant. Revenue sharing means we can use this as general revenue. All I have to do is report back how we spent it. Yeah, and it's that's all I do is ask for it.
Keep asking.
LATC, LATCF,
What did you say that stood for?
Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund. So qualified counties, which Kewaunee County is one, get this, and it's based on, again, I don't know the exact formula, but it's based on payment in lieu of taxes from the Department of the Interior and something from the Fish and Wildlife Service. So they must own land somewhere in Kewaunee County, and because of that, we get some set of amount based on their formula. Their formula wasn't disclosed. But at a minimum, if you qualify as a county, you get 50,000. The maximum any county can get is $6 million. We and most of Kewaunee or Wisconsin counties got 50,000. There's a few in the northern district that got quite a bit more. Forest County, for example, is going to get 971
annual thing.
Just two for sure. They implied it was ongoing, but they didn't go to specify that this is ongoing. So come this time next year, if I don't have any more information, the 2024 budget will say zero because there is none. But for 22 and 23, we're gonna get $50,000.
You gonna put that in the groomer fund?
We can spend it on anything we want. So throw it out.
So again, you said that's the local assistance and tribal
Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund.
systems.
Yeah, they're saying they were inconsistent with how they treated certain municipalities.
Sounds like back pay is in order.
Oh, yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Paul on these adjustments? If not, I entertain a motion to approve them as presented. Moved by John, second by Virginia to approve the proposed budget adjustments. All in favor?
Right.
Aye. Was there none? Motion carried. Thank you, Paul. Okay, everybody should have had a chance to look at the vendor payments around the line. Any questions on those? Everyone had an opportunity to supplemental payroll and sign them. I would entertain a motion to approve the supplemental payroll. Second by John, all in favor? Aye. Was there none? Motion carried. Any other matters to come before the committee?
No, sir.
Member of anything, Mr. Chairman? Okay, next meeting, we're gonna meet on November 1st at 5 o'clock. And then we should schedule a meeting.
With the correction of the one prior to the board.
Yeah, the October 18th at 5.
Oh, I'm sorry. October 18th at 5 o'clock. Then are we gonna meet an hour before the board meeting on November 1st, or is there no need to? Unless something comes up.
I don't believe there will be a need, Mr. Chair.
Leave it hanging in there. We'll
So then can we go shoot for Friday, November 11th? No, it's Veterans Day. but- Steve?
Yeah. I'll think I'm going down.
Okay. Let's do November 11th, 8 o'clock.
And at that one, Mr. Chair, we'll more than likely, well, no, we're going to be approving the insurance on the 18th. The 11th is just a normal meeting, but I thought, you know,
Hopefully we'll
just
have
to
the-
give us a break from
Yeah.
the budget.
And maybe we can do, if you have the Winter Park agreement, we can maybe
Yep.
get that done that day.
Yeah, meeting the 15th.
In November? No, because we'll be approving the budget on the first. Unless for some reason the chair or the board feels that a meeting is necessary.
The 11th, I may not be back yet, but.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
John, second by Virginia, to adjourn, all in favor? Aye, opposed, or none, we are adjourned at
9:49.